According to Gear Gods, this is 5 ways Djent improved metal. 1. It raised the bar for interesting rhythm guitar. Metal is many wonderful things, but between the old power metal power chord ring, death metal tremolo picking, and metalcore chugging, there needed to be a new kind of groove. Bands like Periphery and Animals as leaders popularized big, jazzy chords and polyrhythmic syncopation over the stale riffing of traditional metal. I was ready to fucking jump ship to jazz for good if I had to hear another trite double-picked thrash riff. 2. It made it okay to not dress like a hobo. Metalheads are fashion whores. Not as bad as punk rockers or hip-hop fans, but they are still one of the most fashion-conscious groups of music fans I know. Go to any metal festival and it's the same looks. I once took my girlfriend in high school to a Helloween concert, and she looked around and whispered to me, "Why do all these people look homeless?" I didn't have a good answer. But the Derelicte fad didn't look like it was going to subside anytime soon until this wave of bands came along with a more subdued and tasteful look. Modern prog metal bands play for crowds that don't look like they're going to ask you for spare change, which means that girls come to the shows. 3. Increased focus on production means better sounding metal. The Djent crowd brought production to the forefront of our consciousness, and better sounding production benefits everyone. Meshuggah albums sound better than most things you will experience in your life, and that's because they put in the time to make them sound magical. They gave a shit about what kind of pickups they were using, and tried different kinds of amps until they found the sound they were looking for. 4. They elevated Meshuggah to their rightful place as gods. Meshuggah are, of course, the godfathers of Djent as we know it. Bands like Derelicte, Periphery, Tesseract, and North Lane all start with the basis of Meshuggah worship and add their own elements. They are right to worship Meshuggah, they fucking rule. They even recorded their most recent album live in the studio, with real tube amps, and it sounds fantastic, and they're easily one of metal's best live acts. But they have been increasing in popularity recently, with each successive album achieving their highest first-week sales ever, due, in no small part, to the wave of bands carrying the banner that bears their sigil. 5. It encourages musical exploration. For all the complaints that Djent all sounds the same, the bands that have championed it are the ones I see most strongly embracing sounds and stylistic elements from outside metal. Many of them have taken these influences greatly to heart, with bands such as Periphery and Animals evolving into something completely different. I follow a lot of these dudes on social media, and the music they talk about the most is pretty rarely metal, and those diverse influences make their music a great deal more interesting to listen to. Jake Bowen of Periphery has an EDM side project. Javier Reyes of Animals as leaders plays classical guitar, and I discovered Dirty Loops from an Aaron Marshall Instagram video. According to a Gear Gods article, this is 5 ways Djent ruined metal. 1. It expedited a race to the lowest possible tuning. Tunings went from 7-string guitars in B standard, to drop A, to drop G, then to 8 strings, and then to 8 strings in drop E. That's a full octave down from the standard tuning E. It took 20 years for metal to move from E standard to drop C now, 7 years after Djent broke, no one can tune higher than drop B without sounding like a classic rock band. Thanks Djent, you assholes. 2. It robbed us of a generation of bass players. Ever since Djent became popular your band can't find a decent bassist. Coincidence? To accommodate the aforementioned low tunings, the guitar scale lengths got longer. From 25.5 to 27, to 28, to 30. Combine that with the one-note bend, open string, octave riffs and whoa, where have I seen all this before? Baritone, rhythmically focused riffs played one note at a time. Yep. Djentists are all basically playing basses. No wonder there are no actual bass players around anymore, they all bought Rondo 8-string guitars and started their own genre. 3. Its declining popularity might drag Meshuggah down with it. For a long time Meshuggah were singular. They had an aura of mystery. They were unfuckwithable. Now a flood of bedroom producers in V-necks, with slate drums, and Mayon's guitars have oversaturated the market with a second-hand imitation of their style. It's gonna end up really dating Meshuggah's sound because they're so similar. And, when the Djent sound becomes passé, there's a good chance that Meshuggah's popularity will wane with it. 4. It dorkified the breakdown. Much like G-Eazy is a safe way for white people to listen to rap, Djent became a safe space for metal dorks to enjoy breakdowns while not feeling too guilty about violating their Metal Archives forum cred. Except Djent breakdowns are an odd-time signatures and aren't really catchy. But that makes it elite and super metal, because regular people don't like it. Metal dudes need to accept that crushing, half-time, simple/open chug riffs are sick. Go full crowd kill, or just stop with the faux mosh. Leave it to the experts over in beatdown. 5. Precious resources were wasted on 9-string guitars. The only dude that is qualified to play 9 strings is Josh Travis. Everyone else, slow your roll. There is no good reason to play 9 strings. You're, for sure, not using all of those notes. Realistically, you're only using the bottom 3 strings for djents and top 3 strings for whittles. It's a waste of wood and labor. There's an opportunity cost, damn it. What cool shit could Ibanez have made instead, if they hadn't spent their R&D budget figuring out how to make these abominations of God called extended range guitars? Which of the up-and-coming metal guitarists lost out on a signature deal to make way for a flash-in-the-pan 9-string model? What do you think about this article? Did Djent really ruin metal? Tell us your thoughts down in the comments below.
Periphery guitarist Jake Bowen recently got a chance to discuss the Djent style, branding it far too one-dimensional for his taste. Chatting with Metal Hammer, Jake said that the genre's main problem has to do with the fact that it was born on the internet. He noted, "The whole Djent thing, I would have embraced it a lot more had there been a bigger diversity in the music, but the problem with that whole thing was it was born on the internet. It really started with Meshuggah, and they had no idea that they were starting anything. They were doing what they do, and they're an incredible band, and no one can touch them or come close to sounding like them. But the actual bulk of the scene started on the internet." The guitarist continued, "What I've noticed is that these bands that try to be Djent only take 1 or 2 flavors from the sound and don't get the fact that it's way more dense than that. So you'll only hear 2 types of things happening in a lot of mediocre Djent bands' music, and it's not engaging enough, and it sounds like everything else. I think that's the mistake that these Djent bands are making. They're taking the groove aspect and the low-tuned riffing aspect, then putting some sort of clean guitar passage over it. Then they write 10 songs like that and call it an album. There's a lot more to it than that." Focusing on the backlash Periphery have received for changing their musical direction on their double album effort Juggernaut, Alpha and Juggernaut, Omega, to see an enraged fan burning his Periphery hoodie over it. Bowen noted, "It's happened to me too, man. It's happened to everybody. A perfect example is Metallica. They're never going back, they're never going to write another And Justice for All, but that's okay. They did exactly what they wanted to do. They changed their style, and they're happy about it. I don't think they have any regrets. It's just the way things work. I think people get varying degrees of frustrated about it. For me, I'm just like, alright, that was nice while it lasted, while other people are straight to the internet and commenting about how much we suck and how the first album was better. If any of us in Periphery put on the first album, we'd be like, turn it off. We don't want to listen to this anymore. We still play the old stuff occasionally on tour, but we are over it. We want new stuff. There's not a lot of sympathy for us that we have to do this stuff every night. It's expected. And we're happy to play it. We want to play it. I don't want to send the wrong idea. It's just after doing it for a certain amount of time, it's old stuff. It's like eating the same dinner every night. You want to try something else." Periphery guitarist Mark Holcomb talked about the essence of heavy music and how being heavy has nothing to do with drop tunings, telling them in music. He said, "You can sound heavy in any tuning. To me, it's about intent. It's about writing. It's about the attitude of a riff. It's about what it embodies and how it comes across. And even lyrics. The lyrics can make a part seem heavy as balls. There's so many things. A freaking drum beat. A drum beat. If you put a straight 4 on the floor drum beat over New Groove, or the walk-off 2010s Periphery or something like that, it would be the least heavy thing ever. It's not about the riff. It's about everything coming together." Mark also talked about Periphery's approach to writing music, saying, "We like to do our writing together in a room. I'm saying me, and Misha, and Jake, the 3 guitar players. We'll sit down, and if Jake says, 'I've got this riff, check it out,' or Misha's like, 'Check out this riff,' and plays it. It's for Marigold. The first time I've heard that, I was like, oh god, this is going to be a sick song. But none of us said to each other, you know what would sound better? If we played it on the 8th string. None of us ever do that, because you start to lose the spontaneity and original sort of fire of the riff. The reasons that riff was crafted, that it just sort of sparked out of nowhere out of your head. It's an amalgamation of the tuning, the action on your guitar, your headspace, so once you start to swap out one of those variables, you could lose it. I can count on one hand the number of times, because we have done it, it'll either fail horribly, which happens more often than not, or it'll be successful. Animals' leader's guitar champ Tosin Abasi recently sat down with Music Radar to jot down his top 5 tips for all the guitarists out there. This is what he said. 1. Know your intervals. Learn the major scale in all of its diatonic modes and chords, then learn all the scales intervallically, so, playing in thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, and sevenths. Understanding these intervals will allow you to have a lot more feeling in your phrasing. It will bring much more tonality to how you play, for sure. 2. Learn how to divide time. Use the metronome for a lot of your practice, and start with tempos you can pull off without much strain, and then you increase it from there. I honestly believe the metronome is central to producing good technique. 3. Study classical pieces. I also think it's important to learn some beginner to intermediate classical guitar. The open right hand is an underutilized part of electric guitar playing, in my opinion. Whether you want to play rock or bluegrass or folk or flamenco, learning these pieces will help. 4. Pick up a real book. Learn some jazz standards, because that will show you how harmony works within keys, and will ultimately help you understand voicings better. It really blurs the line as to how guitarists think. A lot of players look at scales and don't realize that chords are simply certain notes played simultaneously. 5. Don't forget other instruments make music too. Don't be afraid to look at other instruments, from bassists to horn players to pianists, even listen to electronic music. It's really interesting how a lot of that stuff utilizes arpeggiators in an instrumental context. Pliny discussed his favorite guitar chords recently with Total Guitar, saying, "One chord I use way too much is the major ninth. For example, try fretting the 7th fret on the G string, 5th fret on the B string and 9th on the E, so you get the root, 2nd and major 7th. There's the weird dissonance to those notes. It's happy but it's not cheesy happy, it's an intelligent happy chord." Another type I use could involve the 6th fret on the D with the 5th frets on the B and E strings, muting the G string. Raising that 6th fret note 1 semitone up gives it a nice resolution. There are various tonalities like that which I enjoy implementing. It's the same concept with my lead playing. I like to take a note that isn't quite the one you want it to be, it might be next to it. That's appealing because you can string the listener along without ever getting to the destination. It's almost like a rambling story when people don't land on the route. That's what I find satisfying. That's what makes me want to hear a guitarist keep playing.